and welcome to HCS Connects. I'm Kelly Gorel with Hampton City Schools. Today we have Heather Peterson with us, who is our Director of Climate and Culture, so we can learn about all of the good work that's going on in Hampton City Schools. So welcome to HCS Connects.
Thanks, Kelly. It's great to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you here, as we have just realized this is your first opportunity to be on HCS Connect. So we've got a lot to talk about and catch up on, because you have been working on climate and culture for years now. So there's lots of conversation to be had. So tell us, what is climate and culture? How are they different, and how do we define those in Hampton City Schools?
Sure. Yeah. Those words often get changed or used interchangeably. And when we think about culture, I like to draw it as a heart almost. It's the heart of the organization. It's what are our core values? What do we believe? The way that we do business in Hampton City Schools. Climate is really the environment that sits in. So your climate, what it feels like on a Monday versus a Friday afternoon, can change day to day. But when you have that strong culture and you're attentive to creating those core values and beliefs, that's what really helps you navigate those tougher days sometimes. And at Hampton City Schools, how we define climate and culture is creating a safe and nurturing environments for students, staff, and families in our division.
Which is a great, that's a great way to compare them, because we know, even during pandemic, the climate could change daily as people are anxious, what's going on in the world, what's going on in schools. So to have that sound culture, that safe, nurturing environment, I mean, it's just as important as academics.
Absolutely. It really is the plate, is what we like to call it, that everything sits on. It's your foundational pieces. You can have the best instructional practices and curriculum, but if that environment or that belief system isn't there, then it makes it definitely more challenging. So they have to work in tandem together.
Well, and I said, you've been doing this work for years. This is something that's been a priority for Hampton City Schools well before pandemic, March of 2020.
Absolutely.
So what are the goals or priorities for climate and culture in Hampton City Schools, and how has that work evolved over the years?
So this work has been in place, through our strategic plan starting way back in 2010, creating that safe and nurturing environment. And then came right along again as we continued. We said this is a goal that we want to keep a focus on. So for the 2015-2020 strategic plan as well. So when we think about things about building relationships and making sure that every student feels they have at least one caring adult that they connect with.
So important.
Absolutely. And when you talk about that pandemic space, how in the world virtually were we going to make that happen? And we have tremendous educators and administrators and transportation and food services that went above and beyond to always let our kids know, even during that time, how much they mattered and that they were connected for sure. And again, we want to do that in an environment with minimal disruptions, where both adults and students feel they are physically and emotionally safe as well. So those are some of those big goal areas.
So they're big goals, and they're part of the strategic plan. And this was, like you said, 2010. So this is well pre-pandemic, during pre-pandemic, during pandemic. That's a mouthful. But those were goals. So how are we putting that work into life? How is that happening? How are we preparing our staff for that?
Right. One of the things when Dr. Smith joined us on board is he really wanted us to unpack, what does this mean? What does it mean when we talk about that safe and nurturing environment? And again, it's that we want to have a space that's emotionally and physically safe for adults, and we want to be able to do that with minimal disruptions. So when we think about how do we do this work, it's about equipping, again, all of our adults that support young people with strategies for building those relationships, understanding that every single person who enters your school building plays an impact on your climate and culture. So over the years, we've prioritized professional learning. When we think about equipping our administrators, Dr. Smith did stand up and say that, climate and culture is equally as important as academics, and has really made it a priority. Having a task force to really unpack with different stakeholders across the community about what this work is and how we want to prioritize it. One of the cool key things that we were able to do a couple of years ago is we were able to, in each of our schools, to have climate coaches. Okay. So at all of our elementary schools, they each have a climate coach, and that is either a current teacher, a counselor, someone who is already working in that building but supports this work additionally. Middle schools and then high schools have two, and so do our combined schools as well, to really support the efforts of this work. So it's somebody who helps to plan the work, somebody who's a go-to person of brainstorming ideas that we want to focus on. One of the things we've been intentional about is that this isn't separate work. So for all of our schools, we've encouraged us to be part of their school leadership team meetings and just a standing agenda item and priority in each of our buildings. And even beyond our buildings, our departments have really embraced this work as well.
And you say our departments. I'm so glad that you said that, because I have seen you over working with transportation, doing professional development with our bus drivers and all of our transportation staff. I've seen you doing professional development with our school nurses, also our school security officers. So again, it goes beyond just that classroom environment or even the school, that brick and mortar, to all of the individuals that are supporting our students.
Absolutely. Our transportation folks are so important. Sometimes they're the first and or last adult that some of our students will see. And just noticing that student before they get off the bus for the day or when they first arrive, some of them make the biggest difference, and kids have those relationships. Certainly when they walk into our cafeteria staff, our nurses have an important role, all of our paraprofessionals, kids sometimes connect with them in a very different way than they will with teachers. So any adult that has an opportunity to make an impact on a young person's life helps to create that positive climate and culture in our buildings.
And we keep saying climate and culture, but some other buzzwords that are out there with education are social emotional learning. And I've heard you in your responses say a lot of things about emotional support and social support. So what is social emotional learning, and how does that tie to climate and culture?
So that's a great question. And about 2017, there was a huge body of research talking about meeting the social emotional needs of our students. And that for so long with high stakes testing, that some of that work that used to be so paramount kind of got pushed to the side, about helping young people identify and recognize their emotions, strategies for managing those emotions. How do I see and understand the perspective of others, build those relationships, and make responsible decisions? So as we looked at, if we're going to truly create these positive learning and teaching environments, that it is a very emotional business that we run, that you can't teach and you can't learn without the emotions being part of it. Our teachers certainly don't pack their emotions in their trunk and come into school every day, and our students don't leave them at home with them. And so one of the things that's really blossomed over the past 4 years here in Hampton City Schools is, how do we want to embrace this work? We didn't want it to be a check the box. We didn't want it to be just something else we do. And something I'm super proud of is we have not made this a program. We have not purchased anything. We have worked with our curriculum departments, our climate coaches, our administrators, and our staff to really help them see you can do social emotional learning anytime, anywhere. When a young person can identify maybe an emotion that they're having, and then being able to figure out what might be a strategy to help them mitigate that. In the past couple of years, what we've really recognized and what research has shown is we really should have started with the adults first. So in Hampton, we embrace that this is not just something for young people, but this is for all adults. And as you mentioned, I've had the chance just this past summer to work with our nurses, our transportation folks, our administrators, and our front office staff to really talk about the importance of this work and how they can support it. And then one of our big focus areas moving forward is, how will we bring our families and communities into this work so that they understand what we're trying to do and how we partner with them in moving this important work forward.
So it is a lot of work. And it's very important work. But what are some of those accomplishments, besides just recognizing that we should have started with adults and now we're focusing on that? But what are some other accomplishments around the social emotional learning aspect?
One of the things that we wanted to really recognize, again, is that we didn't want to make this a program or, here, do this for 20 minutes a day and check the box. But how could we do this seamlessly? And we know that teachers didn't need one more thing on their plate. So we've tried to be really intentional in working with our curriculum department, who has embedded some of this right into content, being able to talk about emotions of characters or historical figures. One of the things we've done is we've created a virtual toolkit for our teachers, really trying to recognize and help them understand it doesn't have to be a stop drop 30-minute lesson, but here's a quick 5-minute intro that you could do at the beginning of class, or how do you close out your class time. As well as, it really blossomed during the pandemic as we started doing these virtual social emotional learning tips. Really thinking about, oh my gosh, they have so much to plan for as they're switching to this virtual environment, but we didn't want to lose sight of how important that work's gonna be. So now it's twice a month they get a slide deck and a quick video that tells them about some quick tips that they can do 5 minutes or less, and giving them resources that are directly embedded that they can immediately put into practice. And then this past summer, we have done traditionally a learning conference called Rejuvenate. It had to be in a virtual space. Again, this was our 11th year doing it, but this entire conference was devoted to social emotional learning. And so folks could either join us virtually online the day of, or they could become on-demand sessions that teachers at their leisure could take a look at for the areas of interest to build that capacity for social emotional learning.
Well, I want to go back to your SEL tips, because those tips that you sent out weekly when we were last year dealing like full-blown pandemic, some virtual, some in-person, hybrid, and so forth, Those went out each week, and they were not just geared towards students. They were geared towards staff as well to help them, you know, as everybody. It was difficult.
Sure.
I enjoyed, and I even would send you sometimes emails back like, this is great, just watching some of the short videos or just the short tips, like you said, to really kind of refocus yourself and get your head back in the game, just to be there for the school division, the staff, the students.
Yeah. And just really wanting to honor them. I always try to put a piece in there to recognize the work that they're doing, and to help them see that they are indeed the difference makers. I know the word self-care is one that educators get a little frustrated around sometimes, but really, how do you fill your tanks? How do you recharge your batteries when you're pouring so much into others? And so that's always a component I try to include in those tips.
Well, and one of the accomplishments last year, you didn't mention this, was our SEL Matters. Social Emotional Learning Matters. So tell us a little bit about SEL Matters and how we spotlighted some of our great staff last year.
Yeah, so International Cell Day was in March, and it'll be again this year, which we're excited. We're going to make it an annual event with your help, of course. But one of the things we challenge schools to, on that Friday, really promote social emotional learning, highlight the great things happening in their buildings or having some universal activities. We distributed banners and had lots of fun photos, and they were tweeting some of the things we were doing, but we wanted to go deeper than that, and we wanted to recognize some of the practitioners that were really helping to build social emotional learning in adults and or students. And so we did cell shout outs, and people could nominate folks, and your department did a fabulous job. We highlighted those folks on social media, but we also sent them each an individual certificate. And it's great because I'll go out in buildings and see where people have them actually hanging in their classrooms, and just a way for us to highlight but build the momentum of this work and the great people out there that are helping us to spread this work.
Well, and the nice thing about that was they were nominated by their peers.
Yes.
So that was not a, hey, everybody has to submit something. It was, this was out here, you're working with your colleagues, like, please tell us great things about what they're doing so that we can spotlight them. And you and I had the conversation of, I wonder how many we'll get. I hope we get enough because we really want this to be successful. And we got so many.
We did.
Which was fantastic, but it was like, wow. I mean, it was so great to read the different things that were said about them. But then we had to, every 15 minutes or more, put in groups of like 5 or 6 or 7, because there were so many people to recognize because they're doing the good work.
They are, and it was very heartwarming that people took the time to be so explicit about how they saw these people being difference makers.
And they truly are difference makers.
Yes, yes.
So again, a lot of work has gone into this, but where are we going forward with it?
So one of the things we've been intentional about is having a strategic plan for this work, is that we didn't, again, want it to be, oh, this is a year, or that's a buzzword, like you said, because it is very much a buzzword now. The Department of Education actually just released standard guidance on social emotional learning for K through 12. And we've been focusing on this work for the past 4, we're stepping into year 4 this year. So as we look ahead within our strategic plan, again, wanting to make sure that we are, with this year we started doing cell walks in our schools to identify the great things that are happening, but then to think about how can our department do a better job to continue to support our teachers so that they can grow this work as well as other adults. So that's been great, being able to be back in buildings and seeing those activities and getting some data. That's always one of the things that people talk about the work of climate and culture, is it doesn't have as much hard, fast data as academics do. So now this is helping us to drive and see the best practices we've already cultivated, but then how can we provide more support so that we continue to grow this and folks see the meaning behind this work. So that's definitely something that's been helpful. We also have students now, grades 3 through 12, that are doing self-assessments, both in the fall and the spring, and that's generating some great data. So it's not an adult who perceives where I am, but it's actually students being able to identify how they feel about their self-awareness or their self-regulation skills, giving us insight again on what's going well and where some students might need some specific intentional work. So moving forward, we want to use that data to drive and inform the work we do. We want to continue to provide learning opportunities that make a difference and bring in, again, every adult that we can that make a difference in this work.
So a lot of communication's gone on within our own staff, and we're doing this work for staff and students. But if I'm a parent and I'm just interested, because we keep saying those are buzzwords, even though we've been doing this since 2010, you know, we're on year 4 where VDOE has just put out a model this year.
Yes.
So we really have been intentional, it's going well. But if I'm a parent, where could I go to find out more information about climate and culture.
If you go on our website and under departments, hit the climate and culture department, it unpacks the definitions you and I talked about, but it also has a direct link to what is social emotional learning and access to the toolkit as well. So they definitely can learn about that there. And we've also really embraced this at the school level to encourage our schools to be thinking about ways to engage families in this work as they're developing their own plans.
Excellent. Well, we have learned a lot in a very short amount of time because, like we keep saying, it's been years of work. So to talk about it in 10 to 15 minutes, but I think it's a great backdrop as far as what we're doing in Hampton City Schools, and that climate and culture is just as important as academics.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for letting me share today.
We are very excited you were here to share. And thank you for joining us on HCS Connects. And remember, it's easy to stay connected.